So good morning. As I said, my name's Dennis Gleeson. I'm a recovering political analyst from the CIA, and I did analytic methodology work. I found myself in a weird spot because I actually have a background in classics. I studied late imperial Roman history. And so to find myself talking at MIT about technology is a little bit weird for me, right? The funny thing is, as a political analyst, I developed a reputation as being one of the analysts least hostile to technology, right? That we have intelligence failures is nowhere near as surprising as the fact that we have intelligence successes, given the technological and bureaucratic, impediments to analytic work. So starting last summer, I really began to think about AI as it relates to analytic work, because prior to that, with the release of ChatGPT, what we found, or what I've been hearing from colleagues, is it was interesting but not compelling. It was interesting to think about it in the context of the art of the possible. However, it's a AGI system that is really, it's not ready to work with subject matter experts yet. And so over the course of the past couple months, I've found that there are really two conversations taking place, right? The first is taking place at the peak of inflated expectations, which is, hey, AI is going to be amazing, it's going to be wonderful, it's going to do all these really great things. And then in the trial of desperation and despair are analysts who keep saying, yes, but what about sourcing? What data is actually contained in the language model? What is the validity? How recently is it? How is it weighted? Who weighted it? These are all things that really matter to analysts. And from the top of the peak, a whole peak of inflated expectations, what we hear is, don't worry about it. It's going to get better. We're going to fix that problem. It's on our roadmap. I mean, there's arguably no more dreaded phrase when it comes to analytic technology than it is on our roadmap, because we'll see kind of how that plays out. So the conversation, this is really sparked by something that came up in one of the orientations where somebody asked, what's going on in the intelligence community as it relates to AI? And the answer is a lot. In fact, the intelligence community is surprisingly transparent and willing to talk about the problems and they encounter and the hopes that they have. Nand, who is the CTO for the CIA, says, hey, we're going to really run into problems with precision work. Generally speaking, analytic work really can range from very imprecise general work, scenario generations, to spur thinking, to really highly precise stuff around how do we know that? And so when we talk about, what's the role of AI in the intelligence community, right? There's really kind of two parts to the equation. One is what the CIO is doing, and the CIO has done massive investments in cloud computing, and they will talk about this. And then we have In-Q-Tel, which is the strategic investment arm of the intelligence community, making investments in AI platforms. So the In-Q-Tel had a public investment in Primer AI back in 2017. We've been thinking, the intelligence community has been thinking about this for a while. They've been using natural language processing and machine learning technologies for quite some time. It's being done, except it's still hard because they are working to a set of standards that are not currently being met by generative AI today. And so, the one way that I think about it, and I think is a really good way to think about it, is do you have enough confidence in AI today to put the output of it in front of the President of the United States on a daily basis? That's what the intelligence community does. And the funny thing is, going back to the idea of intelligence failures, when there is a failure, very rarely is the CIO or the vendor sitting up with the director of intelligence or the director of CIA as they get wire brushed by the US Congress. So we are working intelligence analysts are working to a very different set of standards, a long set of standards. And the funny thing is that they're not unique in this, right? I mean, they are really working to a set of standards that academics have, that researchers at think tanks have, that investment analysts have. There are all these people who really need a high precision, high confidence sense of what's going on inside of an AI before they can recommend making a decision based on it. So when I look across the AI space, I really think that there's three areas that we need to think about for work and experimentation and inquiry. First is data and cleanliness and quality. You know, I found this with search when I was a director of strategy. I find it now with AI, right? Oh, you know, if only the data was cleaner, we could do amazing things. Well, maybe if we say that to our monitor long enough and enough times, the data will suddenly like self-clean itself. Sadly, that's not true, right? I mean, on the one hand, you have analysts saying, I wish the data was cleaner and I wish we had more data. And on the other, you have CIO, developers and engineers saying, hey, if we had clean data, we could do amazing things. And when you stand between them and say, you know, how about we all come together and do something about that? Everyone's counting tiles on the ceiling. Because data cleanup is unsexy and thankless and tedious, and yet it is critical to our future. For every dollar that's invested in AI, it'd be interesting to see 10 cents invested in data cleanup. Not happening. The next part is transparency, explainability, and trustworthiness of AIs. We've known for decades AI has a black box problem. The good news is we are perpetuating that problem into the future, right? I mean, it's no less of a black box today than it was 10, 20 years ago. We need to get there, and I think, from where I sit, if you do the work on data cleanup and you expose some of that data, the metadata around it and the kind of the sourcing and all that work, you begin to actually build out, not only are you making AI more transparent, but it becomes more trustworthy. Without sourcing, whatever generated response an AI gives might as well be a fortune cookie. And the question is, to what degree do you trust your fortune cookie, right? And then lastly, there's analytic cultures and human-machine teaming. The analytic culture is kind of a weird one because analysts tend not to actually talk about what they do or how they do it. You can find how they're trained, but if you actually push to shove, said, hey, explain to me how you came up with that analytic line of reasoning, they can talk you through it, but it's very artisanal and it's very idiosyncratic in the best possible way. You have, in any analytic organization, tens, if not hundreds, of human expert systems triaging data and weighting it dynamically every single day. And so to start to tap into how and the thought processes behind how they weigh data is an area ripe for like exploration and experimentation. And then lastly, I think we need to talk about human-machine teaming. In that AI right now as a standalone system, I don't see it, and I think the common sense of the conversations that I have been in is that AI does not replace human analysts, but rather becomes an adjunct to the human analyst. How do we engage human-machine teaming and human partnering so that there is feedback loops between both and both get smarter as time goes on? So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. I really appreciate it.